what we continue to hear from people in texts and phone calls and random LinkedIn messages are things like, hey, I have an experience I'd like to share. And it's often could be part of their grieving process. It could be an experience they had that they don't want anybody else to have. And so they're looking to us to kind of, help get their message out. But people have been incredibly generous in sharing and helping us discover what it is exactly we need to solve.
You're trying to juggle all of these different things. You're trying to reckon with your own emotions.
And work, right?
Yeah, and work.
Oh, wait, is there a resting place? Is there a headstone? Like how do you...
And by the way, 2 months figure this out while I was in like therapy over what had happened.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
So I know that that everyone else was really going, so you're trying to juggle all of these different things. You're trying to reckon with your own emotions.
And work, right?
Yeah, and work. And my work was not great.
Okay. So you had to struggle with the time off. You had to struggle with...
She passed away on a Friday, and by Monday I was in the office.
Wow.
So they allowed me to take off the time to take care of her, but that was my own PTO. I didn't have any sort of grief, bereavement. Yeah. Time off. They were nice in the sense that like I would literally start crying at my desk and they would be like, do you need to work from home for the rest of the day? Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Like that part was nice.
But work
from home.
Right. And between Jake, Amanda, and Ben, similar experience, different experience?
Jake, yeah, similar. I think everyone was pretty much back to work on Monday. I think maybe Amanda took a few days off. Amanda also cleaned out the house. She was the only sibling back. We all had to go back to work.
I was given the space and time that I needed, which I'm super fortunate for. And my manager at the time was very, very understanding. My team was very, just really supportive during that process. But the other thing that I found is, thinking back about being that strong person and also thinking about what my dad would have wanted. At that point, I could not stay home and be around it all. I had to keep moving, and work offered a very welcome distraction for that. For me to sort of put my head down and keep me occupied during the day. Otherwise, I could sit around and, be devastated all day long. But knowing that there were people that were depending on me at home at the end of the day, that allowed me to just be distracted for, a good chunk of the day, knowing that when I would get home that, it's the second job and they would also keep me on my toes. So
sure.
I was offered, time, like I think generally speaking, as we know, and as you know, not enough by any means, but I was lucky in that my manager, gave me the flexibility and allowed me to take the time that I needed.
Yeah, that shows up as a pretty critical element. It seems like for people who are working that experience a loss, that time, both time and the distraction, like it's sometimes equal weight. And a lot of people say things like, hey, the 2 weeks was great and I loved being able to get back, but then I needed some time later, right? Because I think you said in that quote, I think you said grief is gnarly, pops up in goofy places and in goofy ways sometimes that can still be debilitating very far from the actual event.
Absolutely. I think, so it was also interesting that the policy was the same for if I lost my second or third cousin as it was if I lost my direct parent, which I think is a problem because those are very different.
Sure. Sure.
And as you said, like there would be moments where I would be at my desk and lose it. Just absolutely lose it. So think about now, today we're, mostly working from home. So you have the ability to do that in the privacy of your own home. But I was on the floor and would just get very emotional and literally lose it. And, everyone was great about asking. And then there were just the times where it was like, this isn't the day for you to ask me. And, but they don't know. And I'm, I'm thankful for that. But yeah, that's a thing too, is just being on a client call. And, and there were moments, there were times I said this to a friend too, where when I thought about the fact that I would never see him again, it literally takes my breath away. It would make me stop breathing. Like I just thinking through that, because I went to school away from home. I lived out in California away from home for a while. So there were many moments where I wouldn't see my parents for months. And so at first, it kind of felt like that, like it's just a break, I'm going to see them again. And then thinking and truly internalizing that I'm never going to see him again. It's a lot.
The most progressive companies will give parents, 3 to 4 months of paid maternity or paternity leave, parental leave.
Sure.
And then typically, like the most we see from a bereavement perspective would be 5 days. And that's if it's a close, family member. So a child, a spouse, a parent, and so I think the reality is like when I came back or when others who've lost someone comes back, like that time is insufficient. 3 to 5 days off is really insufficient to go through that entire process. In similar ways, I think 3 months of parental leave is pretty insufficient, especially if it's your first time to really get back into the same energy level and output, to work. And so I think it's just, like I said earlier, I boil it down to space and grace. And so the space is realizing like, okay, this person's normal output would be 8 to 10 hours a day. And, maybe for a period of time, it's going to be 5 to 6. And so we need to give them that space. And then the grace is around realizing, okay, because they're not going to have that same capacity and output as before, like what burdens can we practically alleviate? So can we assign different tasks that they typically do to other people?
Sure.
And so sometimes that means like other people might have to work more, or different things that they were doing that may not be a top priority, like get pushed to the side because they are trained to do other things. And so there were, practical tasks that I do for clients, for prospective clients, that team members, just took off my plate and just ran. They were trained to do, so they ran and did that. And so I think just that's what I mean by grace too, is just like, what are those like practical things we can take off of people's plates? And then, I think it's as simple as showing up in the right presence, like that non-anxious presence, and asking questions and mirroring back to people things that are helpful and not empty platitudes. And so a shout out to Liesl Murtis from I forget the name of her company, but I know her website's lieslmurtis.com. But she just
endorsement there.
Yeah, she's really has helped me to think through, okay, like what are those, how do I show up and what do I say and not say?
Sure.
And like that's just so important, especially when we talk about managers and coworkers. It's
Right.
like you can, in some cases, if the way you show up can impact their day or their week, and just sink them if
Yeah.
if you show up with an anxious presence. And so it's really important on a human level, but then also on a productivity level.
Totally.
And how we show up when someone's going through something like this.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your team, some of the things that they did, and you mentioned it earlier, just 2:00, 3:00 hits and you hit your wall. And it sounds like they made space for that to be okay, because in a lot of places that might be really, really tough for teams to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you were able to take that space, and probably still, I would imagine, need space on certain days or every day. And you and your leadership and Don's leadership, and as the company has grown, you seem to have made almost developed a culture of that being okay, right? A very caring, compassionate, understanding culture that, yes, we have a business to run, but it's run by people, for people. And if they aren't in a good spot to run the business, then let's allow some grace and let's allow some space.
Yeah.
I'll speak for myself. I went through this big loss. I had no idea how I was going to survive. You don't bring it to the moment. You think long term. You're like, how am I going to spend the rest of my life like this? There's so much that goes through your mind, right? And then, some people have to go right back to work. You get 3 days, 4 days, and then you have to go right back to work. That wasn't my case. I actually blew my savings. I couldn't. My mental health was shot. Again, I couldn't read a sentence off a book. I couldn't focus on anything. I could barely eat. It was just awful. And I couldn't go back to work. I couldn't function. Literally my cognitive function was impaired for so long. And I just took care of myself that way. But everyone kept trying to tell me always, and I would stop them. That's why I say kept trying, because I would stop them and say, stop telling me this is going to get better with time. It's been a year. I feel the same. It's been 2 years. I feel the same. I think what really changed it was focusing on, okay, what can I do to make this livable for me? Because it isn't going anywhere. And if I'm going to be alive, and I know I have to be with this grief. And in the beginning, you resisted, at least I did. I resisted it. And now I have such a beautiful relationship with my grief. It's almost as if I've become one with it. But it takes time to process that and to really, you have to get to know yourself, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. When I think the platitudes, again, come from a place of love, but it also comes from a place of being scared as well of what that means in the person's life.
And I think of why you are starting Bereave. It's because that time and space after someone has passed is so important for immediate family members, for the organizations, companies that they were a part of, for the community as a whole. And this can't be missed in our culture. And it often is, because we are quick to just to move on and to forget, and it's just a blip on the radar. But it's so important for humanity to properly grieve and to attend to that process.
Right.